Welcome to today's webinar, Reaching the Cost Tipping Point for Commercial Electric Vehicles, sponsored by Lightning eMotors. I'm Chris Wolski, Custom Content Editor with Work Truck, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. I encourage you to ask questions during the webinar at any point, and we will try to address them all. Our speaker today is Tim Reeser, CEO and co-founder of Lightning eMotors, manufacturer of zero-emission solutions for fleet trucks and buses, including powertrains for zero-emissions electric trucks and buses, zero-emissions fuel cell vehicles, and telematics. Tim has been involved with alternative transportation technology since 1990 when he helped design the first dedicated CNG truck for General Motors while at Colorado State University. So without further ado, I'll turn the reins over to Tim. So Tim, take it away.
Thank you very much, Chris, and excited to have so many people on the line today. I promise we'll keep it engaging and interesting. As a starting point and to provide some context of where we're at and some pictures in a world of COVID today, it's nice to give everybody at least a plant tour virtually. So that's what this video will do, is give you a bit of a virtual plant tour and an idea of what we're up to. So with that, if we can start the video, we'll be ready to go.
Lightning eMotors specializes in commercial electric vehicles, from medium-duty vans all the way up to motor coaches. You'll see in our factory lots of customized vehicles, like shuttle buses with wheelchair lifts, like large Class 6 delivery trucks with refrigerators or with custom lifts on the back. Our ability to deliver a very wide variety of technologies, order sizes, configurations, and customizations in a very cost-effective manner to our customers makes us highly unique and specialized in this space. What you see in our factory is flexible lines, both to build the powertrains and to assemble the electric vehicles. Our flexible lines allow us to adapt quickly to a wide variety of orders and a large quantity of orders as they come in. Not only is this facility the largest commercial electric vehicle production facility in the United States today, it also has capacity to continue to expand at a very fast rate. Sitting on a campus with over 1 million square feet today and an incredible labor pool in northern Colorado, we are committed to expanding at the fast pace that this market wants to take us. Lightning eMotors is the product leader today, with more medium-duty commercial electric vehicles on the road than any other OEM. This product leadership is not just a function of volume, but also a function of product quality and product features. We lead today, and we're committed to leading going forward.
All right, I think we're back. One of the things we'd like to do is have a bit of a poll question here. Kendra, if you could go ahead and release the poll. And I think this will set a stage for how we talk about ROI, so I think this is a very important thing to look at. And what we're asking is, what has been the biggest barrier to electrification of your fleet? And there's a variety of options here in terms of what you get a chance to see. Number one is initial purchase cost. Number two is availability of charging and charging infrastructure and the complexity of that. Number three is whether or not you can get the products you need in terms of, for example, trucks or specific platforms or buses. Number four is whether or not your leadership is bought into buying electrification. Number five is because the maintenance costs or needs are unknown. And six is because your team or group might be unclear on the total cost of ownership. So if you can give us some feedback on how that looks, we're kind of watching the polls in real time here. So I love technology and the fact we can see it. And certainly what we see as these polls are coming in is initial purchase cost tends to lead, and that's going to be one of the key things, obviously, we're addressing and talking about today. We'll also talk about charging infrastructure. I'm very interested to see that is the second largest on the list is charging infrastructure, and the third being products. So very interesting on the poll. We'll come back and look at it in a little more, and we've got a few other polls. Thank you all for taking the time to vote. So with that, we're going to go ahead and drive into slide 4, which is the Lightning eMotors, what we do, and formerly known, many of you might have heard of us before as Lightning Systems, and before that we were Lightning Hybrids, so we've evolved over time. Today we are the largest manufacturer of complete Class 3 to 7 electric trucks and buses. We provide both new and repower options for our customers, and we offer both battery electric and fuel cell electric vehicles. We have analytics, and what you'll see from us today is a very specific analytics where we not only know where the vehicles are, kind of the easy part that many of you get with other analytics packages, but our analytics provide our customers very clear insight into exactly where the energy from the battery is going. So, for example, how much of the battery energy is going towards running the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, how much of the battery system is going towards ancillary systems like the lift system, whether it's a wheelchair lift or a product lift on a box truck, how much of the electrification is going to running for example, the refrigeration system on a refrigeration truck or the X-ray system on an ambulance. So our analytics provide that kind of deep detail, and that allows fleets to then extrapolate how well that specific vehicle is going to work in different climates, how well it's going to work under different loads and different payloads, and how well it's going to work under different scenarios. So we're very, very proud of the analytics and believe it really helps our customers understand exactly what they need from a battery situation. I think everybody knows, and we'll talk about it some more, in our case, we have modular batteries, so we have a lot of optionality around how big a battery you need. If a customer overspecs, or if we overspec that battery with the customer, you have a payload trade-off and also a very significant cost trade-off, and we'll talk more about that. The same way, if we underspec the battery, you don't finish your route and it doesn't do what you want it to do. So it's very, very important to use these analytics to make sure that we address and get you exactly the right size battery for what you want to do. The other side to getting the right size battery is to understand charging, and so we spend a lot of time with our customers talking about exactly what chargers you need, where you need them, and how you need them, and then also working through things like the low carbon fuel system credits, the renewable energy credits, and other aspects that also help offset and or fully pay for the cost of those chargers. We'll talk about it a little bit later. We provide both selling the chargers as well as an option to rent, so to speak, the chargers under a charging as a service model. And then finally, we're very active in helping our customers finance it, and I think this is a very important part of what we'll talk about on the way you think about ROI, because interest rates are so inexpensive today for commercial vehicles and for what we're doing. The advantage of financing these vehicles over a long period of time, whether it's as a lease with a residual value or a full finance, allows you to better predict and see the way the total cost of ownership savings incorporate into the cost of the vehicle. And so we're big fans of financing, and we provide full financing solutions to all of our customers in nearly any scenario. So as we look at slide 6 and we think about factors driving fleet electrification, and I think we've got a poll next here to kind of see how this lines up, but what we're seeing happen, and I think the most important thing as we look back over the 10 years in the past that electrification options have been available for customers, I think the biggest driver today is that we see customers, when they drive our vehicle, test our vehicle, and some of our customers have tested the vehicles for over a year, they come back and say the number one reason they're scaling and beginning to scale up is because their drivers love the vehicle, and in the case of a bus, their passengers love the vehicle. They're quieter, they're smoother, they drive much better, they have great power, they have great features and safety features like hill hold. And I believe that's the big key, one of the big key catalysts we see today that didn't exist 10 years ago with electrification is this idea that the vehicles themselves as an electric vehicle, the Lightning vehicles, are significantly better vehicles all the way around. Obviously, but you add on top of that and say, why else are people going to buy the vehicles? And the number one is, historically has been, hey, I'm being required to. And as we all know, in California and New Jersey and other places, there are a new set of rules that are requiring electrification for everything from the transit bus community all the way to work trucks in urban communities with zero emission zones. So certainly regulation is a driver. We believe it's going to increase and accelerate as a driver as more and more cities do zero emission zones. But certainly, most of us feel with the new administration that both the EPA push, new EPA push, as well as the new administration push will dramatically accelerate the regulatory push. Obviously, the second one being public opinion, and we're seeing this drive behavior of various major fleets. There's a lot of peer pressure out there amongst the major fleets, knowing that they have to meet what both their employees and their customers are expecting in terms of sustainability and wanting to see a real improvement in terms of sustainability, and not just sustainability, but air quality and noise quality in the cities and in the neighborhoods. So we see a big peer pressure and a big push from the major fleets. And then obviously there's been grants, and we'll talk a bit about that today. But I think the grants have been overshadowed now by the fact that with our lower prices and what's happening as our volumes increase, we no longer have a challenge, and this is what you're really going to see, around cost. Originally, cost was the big barrier, and that's why we needed grants. Now that the cost has fallen, and now that we have really inexpensive and long-term financing, the upfront barrier is now gone, and so we'll show that today in the ROI, and that's what I'm excited about. So even without grants, we see customers beginning to scale up their purchases because it pencils out, as I like to say, meaning from a financial standpoint, you save money with an electric vehicle and therefore makes sense to move forward even without grants. That said, there's still a lot of grants out there, and part of our business is we provide a free grant search and analysis for every customer who asks for it. So you'll see us talk about that as we end today. So with that, let's drive into another poll question here. Where are you in your fleet electrification journey? And this allows us, again, to be more specific as we talk about it. So one is a significant portion of your commercial fleet already electrified. Number two, you've just started your deployment of your first commercial electric vehicles, CEVs. Three, you're committed to it, but probably haven't, not yet done a lot of it. Four, you're just exploring it. And five, you're convinced you won't do it. So we'll get a chance to see some of that here as we look at the polls and see what people are saying over the next 45 seconds or so. So it looks like so far we're reporting on about 25 users here, so hopefully we'll see a bit more. But we see in the early polling, a lot of you are just beginning to explore it. So we'll talk to this in that sense, and I think we can give you all a compelling reason to accelerate your exploration here as you see the way the numbers and financials are beginning to look now. We'll give it another 10, 15 seconds to look at this poll and see. Now we've got a little over 50 people or so, 40, 50 people answering the question at this point. So exciting to see the way it plays out. Good. So with that, we'll now go back to looking at what this is going to be. And I did notice there are 6 people who are saying they're not going to electrify their fleet, so I'm excited to talk to that and see if I can change your mind when you look at the way it financially looks viable. So, and hopefully we get into the question and answer too, some of the reasons why it may not be viable if it's not financial. Let's talk about some of the other things, because certainly with the evolution from our standpoint in both range availability and cost, and product availability, we like to believe we can move everybody in this direction. So as we look at the major factors impacting the reduced total cost of ownership of electric vehicles, Number one is obviously fuel costs. And for a lot of people, electricity or the cost of gasoline or diesel has obviously been low over the last year with COVID, except for California, obviously, where tax prices keep it high regardless of the price of oil. But we see taxes going up in many communities, so even if the price of oil stays low, the cost of gasoline will continue to go up in many areas of the nation, and we'll see that happening over the next couple of years. In fact, quite a few areas of the nation with the last election voted in more gas taxes. So we'll certainly see fuel prices going up regardless of what happens with oil, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Electricity costs, are obviously part of what happens, but I think it's important to note, and you'll see this, part of it's not just that many people, in many cases, electricity as a BTU is less expensive per unit of power than an equivalent unit of gasoline. But what's actually the bigger impact of this is the efficiency of these vehicles. So to put it in perspective, our Ford Transit-based electric vehicle today we're rated on the CARB dyno at 66 miles per gallon equivalent. So when you look at energy content use, whereas the gasoline version of that vehicle is about 13 miles per gallon. So, and this is common across our entire set of platform options, about a 5x improvement in efficiency. And so that's partially why, even if, regardless of the price of these two fuels and how equivalent they are, the fact that the electric vehicle is 5 times more efficient for a given amount of energy certainly is a big reason why these electric vehicles are cheaper to operate. But there's a few other things, especially companies like ours. Lightning does a very significant amount of brake regeneration in all of our platforms and all of our electrification solutions. So because of that brake regeneration, you have about 1/5 as often a brake replacement. But it's important to know there are two aspects to that kind of brake replacement. Not only do you spend less money at the mechanic shop, you also spend less time with that vehicle down at the mechanic shop, which means you get more vehicle time back up to continue earning revenue with that vehicle or being on the routes as opposed to being in the shop. So there's a big benefit of having much lower brake costs, brake service costs, and much lower oil change costs. You don't have oil changes anymore. And those of you who've had an electric vehicle know that as a car. I have electric vehicles and non-electric vehicles, and my electric vehicles spend a lot less time in the shop because they don't need oil changes every 3 to 6 months. So that's another reason why, again, you get that vehicle back on the road. A few things people haven't thought about, though, are things like fueling labor time. How much time does your driver spend in line at a gas station and then filling up the gas tank? You no longer have to do that with an electric vehicle. It comes home, it gets plugged in, it's done. It comes to depot, it gets plugged in, it's done. Same thing with the use of carpool lanes. Many people haven't thought about the value of that, but in many states, an electric vehicle gets free use of the carpool lane, and that can have a significant impact on a fleet's ability to get a route done in a day or the efficiency of that. And then finally, there are tax rebates and subsidies, which we've mentioned a bit. So with that, let's go ahead and go to the next slide here, Nick. And let's make some assumptions here and go right into some examples of what the total cost of ownership looks like on these vehicles. We're going to start with a California set of assumptions, which is a $3.10, and we looked up yesterday. These are real numbers. And we can look up as we get into the question and answer time below a specific fuel price for your area, or you can tell us what you want us to use in the equation. But you see two sets of energy components here, and again, the electricity may look cheap, but for most fleets that are in industrial buildings, the depot electricity tends to be that kind of money, 9 cents a kilowatt hour. We've got fueling time. How much does it cost per month? How much time does your driver spend a month putting gasoline in the tank or diesel in the tank? Brake service cost by mile. And you have oil changes, inspections on a cost per mile basis. And then finally, if you're on the West Coast where you have low carbon fuel credits, or what's happening in New York, which we expect low carbon fuel credits to be adopted in New York and other places very soon on the East Coast and in the middle of the U.S. in the next year, low carbon fuel credits play into the ROI cost as well. So with that, let's drop right into a slide 10, where we get a chance to see a specific example of what it can look like with the numbers we pointed out above. This is a specific example of an E450. So this is a Class 4 vehicle on a Ford platform, in our case, a Ford chassis. This was a specific case that looks at a shuttle bus variant. Obviously, you can get that Class 4 chassis in both from a variety of providers on a shuttle bus as well as a box truck, and then we provide the electrification for that vehicle coming through as generally as a new vehicle, but can also be repowered. This example looks at a new vehicle to a new vehicle, a new gasoline E450 shuttle bus versus a new electric E450 shuttle bus with the exact same shuttle bus. So the cost of the bus is the same in both cases. It's just a different powertrain. And so as you look down, the key one, the line 2 that's bolded, the vehicle lease, again, what we've done is use a lease price on the vehicle because it's easier to look at what your total cost of ownership is when we look at the cost of the vehicle. And you can see under that lease price, the cost of the vehicle is significantly more expensive even with grants, with a electric powertrain. And then without grants, it's more expensive yet, obviously, than it is with grants. So you can see it's quite a bit more expensive vehicle under this lease, and that those prices are coming down. So, but we certainly realize it. Number one, as we said, it is a better vehicle, and we'll talk about that. But it is a cheaper vehicle also, or a more expensive vehicle also. So you see the differences in lease. And those are apples to apples, the same period of lease, same interest rate on the lease, etc. We are seeing some major leasing companies start to offer cheaper leases on electric vehicles over time. That the interest rate difference will also help on electric vehicle. But you see, we've also included the charger in here. We've based the charger on a rental time, which we offer just again to normalize everything onto a monthly basis. So as you look at the monthly basis of all of these costs, we've included the low carbon fuel system credit. So this is a West Coast based or future New York based. And you can see that in every case, the electric vehicle on a month pencils out to be significantly cheaper in all of these cases. The key drivers, a couple key drivers, one of them are how many miles you drive. These shuttle buses do, and this is real world, do drive a lot of miles in a month. So obviously they use a lot of fuel in either case, and that's a big part of your fuel savings. The other part, though, is certainly maintenance savings, etc. So as we now look into a second example, slide 10 here, Nick, what we're going to see with slide 10 is now we've lowered the mileage just to give an idea of sensitivity. So now instead of 4,500 miles a month, we're at 3,000 miles a month, all the rest of the variables staying the same. You can see still a very significant savings every month. And again, this is real. This isn't hypothetical. This is a real fleet example with real telematics data on what the energy really is, real world energy costs today, and real world low carbon fuel system credits. But even if you take off low carbon fuel system credits, you can see you're still penciling a savings every single month, even without grants. You're saving $100 a month on this vehicle. So, but obviously with grants, it's a lot more. So you get an idea, even with lower miles, even if you don't have low carbon fuel system credits, you're still saving money every month. And I think that's a very important part to think about. One of the things I do see a question here on what kind of lease. We've assumed a closed-in lease at this, which means at the end of the time period, we guarantee a residual on that lease. So again, we're enabling that by making sure there's a residual guaranteed. And then the customer has the option at the end of that lease to either buy out that vehicle at a very low residual or to turn the vehicle back in, and Lightning will take it back on that residual. So we have, does this cost take into account lower time of use electric charge pricing? And the answer is no. We just took a standard assumption there of 9 cents a kilowatt. One of the things we do provide with all the chargers is software so that the chargers can be programmed and the vehicles can be programmed to not charge during high time of use. And most fleets are able to avoid time of use by leveraging that software to charge during off-peak hours in most cases. So we do certainly have an option to do that at this point and make it compelling. Let's go to slide 11. And Nick, I've got with me here. Do you know when we did the lease on this one? I know you did the latest lease price. Do you know how many hours or how many years we did on that lease? This is a 7-year lease, and I believe we generally on a 7-year lease assume a 10% buyout at the end is the residual, so the customer can take 10% or we'll take it back. So those are at the option of the customers. One of the other questions I just saw pop up: how many states have low carbon fuel credit? And the answer today is California. Washington, Oregon's pretty close. Vancouver, Canada also has one. We've heard New York will pass it when the session starts back up, and quite a few of the eastern states that have joined the consortium in California are expected to also implement it. So there's 13 states involved there. So today it's a small number, and as you can see, LCFS helps, but it's not, certainly this still pencils even without LCFS, but you can see as more and more states adopt LCFS how it certainly helps tip more than pays for the chargers. So it certainly helps tip the ROI, the return on investment over. And I had one others. If somebody has their own leasing companies, will we guarantee the residual value? The answer is yes. So we work with a variety and are happy to add more leasing companies to the fray, and we're happy to still guarantee the residual. From our standpoint, we have a high level of confidence in our product quality, and that's why we're willing to guarantee a residual. We also have a high level of confidence in the growth of the market, so we're very confident after 7 years there's still going to be people interested in a used one of these vehicles, and certainly they'll get a little refurbishment and be ready to go back on the market, and we're confident they'll still be valuable. So those are the reasons why we're able to work in that. How does idling impact your analysis? Another interesting question. The answer is the more idling a fleet vehicle does, the better the electrification solution is, because in an idling scenario, the electric vehicle uses very, very little power and has no output whatsoever in terms of emissions, whereas most gasoline and diesel vehicles, even in areas that have to shut idle off, do tend to see some idle as the drivers keep them on to run air conditioning or heat. So very significant advantage in an idling scenario for electric vehicles, and so the numbers get better in those scenarios because the efficiency, the fuel efficiency numbers get even more separate, meaning you'll see in a high idle environment that a gasoline or diesel vehicle might go from, like an E450, might go from 6 miles per gallon to 4 miles per gallon in a high idle environment, so they use even more fuel. The electric vehicle doesn't use more fuel in those scenarios, so you have even a faster return on the investment with an electric vehicle in high idle. So let's go ahead, Nick, and go to slide 12 here. Or I'm sorry, we've got slide 11, and we've switched vehicles just to give some different examples, because certainly there are different examples. So you look at a Class 3 Ford Transit vehicle. In this case, this is a 3,500 mile per month vehicle, not untypical of a last mile delivery vehicle or a shuttle bus. Lightning has customers running our vehicles both as shuttle buses as well as delivery vehicles. So as we look at this case, again, it does pencil out in terms of making a compelling play to how this is all going to work. A few cases, the charger rental can be a lot cheaper for these smaller vehicles because you could charge with level 2 in some cases. So you could see the charger rental drop from $300, which is the assumption here, down to about $20. So there are some other ways that you could, some other variables that can move to get a little better change here. The biggest reason why these smaller vehicles don't have as fast a return on investment is just simply they don't burn as much fuel in the gasoline variant. So, this vehicle will get typically somewhere on the order of 13 miles per gallon as a gasoline vehicle. So it doesn't burn as much fuel, so it takes a little while longer to pay for it. But the vehicles themselves are cheaper as well. So something to think about on that as we look at that. One of the questions, it says the lease rate indicates that the EV purchase price is 3x the internal combustion price. Somewhere in that vicinity, yes, 2 to 3x is what we see across all the platforms, between 2 times more expensive and 3 times more expensive. That is falling dramatically. I'd say last year it was 4 times more expensive, so we've already seen a very dramatic decrease, and it's really a function of volume. As we get more and more large orders, that price is falling fast. And also as the industry continues to improve with lower battery prices and lower component prices, that will continue to improve. So we expect over the next year we'll see another 30 to 40% drop in prices. So that number will become more and more compelling over the next year because the volumes are increasing and the supply chain is getting more mature. Can a single charger, one of the other questions, can a single charger charge more than one truck? The answer is yes. And obviously, to kind of throw this out, there are 2 kinds of chargers. When we show the $300 a month charger, that assumes a fast charger, a DC fast charger. Typically, that will charge almost all these vehicles in 2 to 3 hours. So certainly it could charge, if you have a 12-hour dwell time at night where the vehicles are sitting, you could certainly charge four vehicles with that same charger. So again, that would certainly improve this particular number if you buy more than one vehicle, because that $300 charger could charge 3 to 4 vehicles. So again, reducing that cost of charging. Your other choice, as I said, is to drop down into a slower charger, and in that case, if you're on a slower charger, it would be much cheaper also, and then you might be a 1-to-1. So 2 ways to think about that. Let's go to another example in slide 12. This is a Class 6. In this case, now we provide Class 6 vehicles as an Isuzu low cab forward, which you see in the picture, but we also provide Hino, we also provide GM Navistar Class 6s. So we'll electrify any of those for your fleets. Again, these electrification can include lifts. We build the modular battery system to support lifts, also to support refrigeration systems on the trucks and other ancillary electric accessories on the vehicles. And you see with these Class 6s, so this one is driving 3,500 miles a month. And again, the numbers will still work with less miles. You do see in this case that LCFS credits are higher for these bigger trucks, and they use more electricity. So not only are the rates higher, but you use more electricity and therefore get more money on them. So those are important aspects that we see in terms of the Class 6 product. That LCFS is a little different. Same charger, because we were assuming a DC fast charger anyway. In these vehicles, you get to a point where you may not be able to share chargers because you have a lot more batteries on them. So this particular DC fast charger spec here that's estimated here in price will probably only charge 2 of these a night instead of 3 or 4 like it could a Transit or an E450. So a couple other questions. We're answering a few of those. What's your maintenance number on tires? For the purposes of this ROI, we assume the electric vehicle and the diesel or gasoline will use the same amount of tires. There's been a lot of debate in the business about whether that's true or not. I would say we nor anybody else, I've seen nobody produce real numbers that say you run through tires faster or not as fast on an electric vehicle. So even with the large amount of data out on Tesla, and I drive a Tesla personally, I've not seen or experienced a significant difference in tire life, vehicle to vehicle, electric versus gasoline. So at this point, we assume those 2 numbers are the same vehicle to vehicle. Even if they're slightly different, when I've done some sensitivity analysis, even if you assume the tires last 30% less on the electric vehicle, it makes a very small impact on total cost of ownership numbers we have here. So we don't include tires. Same thing with windshield wipers and things like that, and windshields. We don't assume there's any difference between a gasoline vehicle and a diesel vehicle. The other thing, because these are standard chassis vehicles, meaning it's a Ford or an Isuzu or a Hino, or a GM Navistar, in all of those cases, we assume the other costs like mirrors and ball joints and et cetera are all the same, because again, you can go to the same dealer and buy all of those same components. So, and then from a warranty standpoint, we match the original OEM warranty, so we don't assume there's any differences on those as well, just to provide, again, some of the assumptions we make in ROI. Is there charger rental available through Lightning? The answer is yes, and we have lots of options on that. Very long-term rentals, medium-term and short-term rentals. We have customers who want to try a vehicle, and we include a rental charger for 3 months with that vehicle, and they can try it for 3 months or 1 month. And then we have customers who've rented chargers for a long time. In many cases, with the LCFS credit, the chargers are free because the LCFS credits, pays for the charger. So something else to think about on this in that case, but in many cases. The other thing is Lightning provides all of the, through our partners, all of the installation, utility work, all the stuff that has to be done to get chargers installed to make it easy for our fleet customers, recognizing many of our fleet customers don't want to be in the business of having to work with utilities and having to work with the installation of chargers. So we manage and handle all those for our customers when they ask us to do that. Happy to work with people who are doing it themselves. Our vehicles do work with other chargers, so ChargePoint's a partner and EVgo are partners, and our vehicles are standard CCS chargers, so they work fine. If your fleet already has charging infrastructure put in place, we will work with what you already have as well, so they don't have to be Lightning chargers. So before answering a few other questions, I'll talk a little bit to a unique proposition here that I have, and this is an example of a repower option. And you can think about this repower both for transit buses but also school buses and coaches. Those are 3 platforms where the vehicles have often been repowered in their history with diesels. Now when those vehicles come in and instead of getting a diesel repower, we can do an electric vehicle repower. We already have those repowers on the market and available today. Some key advantages of doing those repowers: your drivers get the same familiar vehicle, and your service and maintenance people, if that vehicle gets in a fender bender, you probably already have extra spare parts on the shelf for your fleets of these kind of vehicles when you're thinking about school buses or transit buses. So in our opinion, we hear customers tell us all the time that they prefer to keep running the same vehicles they ran before, and that's a big benefit of repowering, that you can continue to run the same brands and types of school buses and transit buses as you ran before. In this repower scenario, we just replaced the diesel engine with a full electric powertrain. And you can see very compelling return on investment on these in terms of what it is. And in this case, it's not the same 2 or 3x difference because you're buying either a new diesel vehicle or you're buying a repowered powertrain and refurbing the vehicle and the powertrain. So the other thing to note is from a time standpoint, if you look at this comparing to buy a new electric school bus or a new electric transit bus or a new electric coach, today most of those electric vehicles have a 1 to 3 year wait period for them, queue. We can repower those vehicles typically in 3 to 6 months. So very fast time to get you up and running with an electric vehicle in a very compelling way that your drivers will find familiar and your service and maintenance people will find familiar. And if you run a tire over a curb, you already have those spare parts. You know what it takes. It's not a new vehicle. If you run have a fender bender, you probably already have spare panels for those school buses or those transit buses already in place, and so we just leverage that infrastructure. But you can see a very compelling proposition there for the repower play as well. So I'll answer a few other questions. Would our payload be the same? And the answer, in a very honest standpoint, is no, in most cases. So electric vehicles, and this is no matter who you get them from, because most, we're buying the very latest, highest density batteries you can buy from LG and Samsung. They're very high quality batteries that are liquid cooled. So these are the most efficient batteries from a space and a weight standpoint. And even with buying the most efficient batteries, if you max out the batteries on the vehicle to get the highest range, you will have a payload reduction. So some of our customers buy a Class 7 vehicle when they were running a Class 6 diesel if they have a lot of payload. But others of our customers who don't run max payload, people who might do packages with a lot of air bubbles in them, some of those customers who don't run max payload don't see an impact, obviously. But if you're somebody, we've got customers in the bottling industry where they run max payload day in and day out. Those customers generally step up when they look at electrification. They step up into the next class of vehicle to make sure they can still run max payload. The other thing that will affect it, if you don't need a lot of range, we've got some customers who, if you're running in Manhattan and on a single shift, you can't get more than 30 miles done in a day. So there's no reason to max out the batteries. And so in that case, you can, in that case, have max payload on that Class 6 vehicle because you aren't maxing out the batteries because you have a lower range requirement. So there are cases where you can certainly have max payload, but there are cases where there is a trade-off, and we work with our customers to understand that and figure out what that means. Yeah, I'll answer a few of the questions, and then we'll get down to a few of the Q&A here. How would savings improve if using a native EV platform? The answer is hardly any, and I'll tell you why. And this is different from passenger vehicles, where passenger vehicles don't have a payload requirement. They don't have a lot of upfit options. So doing a ground-up passenger vehicle makes a lot of sense. It is absolutely a much more efficient way to go. But when you think about work trucks, think about that Class 6 truck. You have refrigeration, you have lifts, you have all sorts of things. So if you go make a native vehicle, you have to start over in the upfit ecosystem. Do you have somebody who knows how to put a lift on the back of that? Do you have somebody who knows how to put refrigeration systems? And the answer is, in a native environment, most of the time not. So the fleet customers are missing their ecosystem that they need to get exactly what they want. But the second thing is, most of these trucks have plenty of space to put batteries, unlike a passenger vehicle where if you tried it, like what Ford did when they upfitted their electric car, their Focus, they had to put the batteries in the back seat and take up back seat space because they were just transitioning a car. And of course, a purpose-made electric car doesn't have to do that. On an electric truck, though, that's not true. There's plenty of space to put batteries on these electric trucks. They have plenty of capacity to do that in frame rail space. Could you make the frame slightly lighter or the body slightly lighter if it's a ground-up electric vehicle? Certainly, but that has significant additional cost. The other thing that happens when you think about a native vehicle is those vehicles now have different spare parts networks, and so where are you getting spare parts? And again, in the case of the Lightning vehicles, if you break a mirror off, you can go to the Ford dealer or a Ford junkyard and buy a mirror, or you might have one in your fleet garage already. That's not going to happen if you have a native vehicle. Where are you getting mirrors? Where are you getting ball joints? Where are you getting drive shafts? All of that is right from the ecosystem today. If you have a native vehicle, it's not. So when you think about commercial vehicles where they're smaller volumes and the need to be up all the time, the benefit of having a vehicle you're already familiar with and that already has a nationwide or worldwide spare parts network and service network, we've found far exceeds the value of 1 or 2% of savings on efficiency from a native ground-up vehicle. But the other interesting point is, so far, the world leader, if you look at Class 3 CARB tests, we own the most efficient vehicle that's ever been tested on the CARB Class 3 test today. That is a Lightning vehicle, even though it's not native, and the other native vehicles aren't as efficient as Lightning's vehicles. So important to note that just because something's ground up does not make it more efficient. It certainly doesn't mean it's cheaper because it's, in the case of commercial vehicles, they're low volume. So building a ground-up low-volume vehicle is always expensive to get all the tooling and certifications paid for. And finally, you've got to deal with spare parts and service networks, which we already have in place. So those are things to think about native vehicles. One other question here, the charger rental is $300 a month. We used a number that is a level 3 charger. And we used it across all of these, meaning it is a DC fast charger, a 25 kilowatt DC fast charger. You could, when you get to the bus, if you have very low dwell time and a long range, you might need a more expensive charger than that. When you get to a Ford Transit, you could certainly, in many cases, use a very inexpensive, much cheaper level 2 charger that will be, a fraction of that cost. So there is some variance here with customers that we can work with. So It looks like now, Chris, we need to Nick turn it back over to Chris for Q&A.
Yeah, he's got a bunch of questions that have been queuing up. We've got a lot of questions to get.
A lot of questions, and let's do that. We had let out that we're happy offline or online if you want to send us your specific gas prices and ranges and vehicles. We're happy to plug it in and give you some answers back and talk through that analysis for you at any time. But in the meantime, Chris, let's queue up some additional questions.
All right, thanks, Tim, and certainly covered a lot of ground here. So as you said, we do have some time remaining, so let's answer a few of those questions that came in. I'm going to, which there are many, so we'll try to get to as many as possible. So first question, how does your transit model compare to the Ford OEM version slated for production next year in 2020? So certainly that was a big announcement. So how do you stack up there?
Yeah, so we work very closely with Ford, and we arranged early on an arrangement of where we'd play and where they'd play. And you'll notice they're very different, but it wasn't really obvious from Ford's announcement. You can go to our website and see a chart of this, and there'll be a big announcement with what we're doing. The number one difference is the Ford product that has been announced really it'll be available largely in 2022. So obviously it's not available today, and ours are. So that's one key difference. The other big difference is the Ford product is Class 2, and it is cargo only. So if you're looking for a passenger shuttle bus transit, you can't get one in an electric variety from Ford. And if you're looking for a Class 3, over 10,000 pound, the dually, you can't get that from Ford. From our standpoint, if you're looking for a Class 2, we do not electrify the Class 2. So there's a very distinct non-compete difference. If you want a Class 3, we're the only ones offering it. If you want a Class 2, Lightning does not offer a Class 2. But also the same thing with passenger. If you want a passenger, Lightning offers passenger, cargo, and cutaway. Ford only offers cargo and cutaway. So again, very important difference. The third one, and this will be announced, so I get to pre-announce it a bit. You'll see a press release from us. We're about to release our Generation 4. So again, like Ford is on Generation 1, we're on Generation 4 product. Our Generation 4 product offers up to 250 miles range. Ford's max mile range is 126 miles. So a very big difference in range just because we've been on the road, we've got a lot of data, we have different batteries and more battery options than Ford does. So that's a very key difference. And finally, the key difference is the number of upfit partners. Lightning works with ambulance vendors like Leader Ambulance to provide a Class 3 ambulance. Ford does not have a electrified ambulance offering, meaning it's going to be very difficult to take their product and make an electric ambulance out of it, or a truck with electric refrigeration systems or other high-power things that Ford out of the gate is a one-size-fits-all infrastructure. Lightning has provided hooks into our infrastructure to allow our partners to develop high-power solutions on top of our electrification, like high-power refrigeration systems and high-power lift systems and X-ray things in an ambulance and things like that we provide. So very key differences between us and Ford. We support Ford. If you want a Class 2 vehicle, we're excited to see people buy Ford's Class 2 vehicle. And certainly we'll support it. We expect many of those customers will buy charging infrastructure from us because Ford does not provide charging infrastructure. They're assuming fleets will go use by and large, the public charging infrastructure network. We believe most fleets will want to charge, behind their gate at depot, and so we do expect we'll be, even when people buy a Ford Class 2 product, we'll still have a role in helping electrify that solution overall.
Okay, great. And I think you may have touched on this a little bit, but it's probably worth repeating. Can you convert Class 3, 4, 5, and 6 cabin chassis vehicles? And if so, what manufacturers are you working with besides Ford? And you've talked a lot about your relationship with Ford, but do you have a relationship with some of the other OEMs?
Yes, so Isuzu we've been working with for 3 years now. Hino is a newer relationship for us. We're now offering Hino as well. We also are working on a very deep relationship with GM Navistar on that product. So we offer electrification on all of those. And then when you get into the coaches, there's a broader variety of options on coaches and transit buses that are, because those are repowers, there's a whole new set of names, as you might imagine, for coaches. And then the same thing in school buses. We have a pretty wide selection of options on school buses as well.
Okay. And following on that, of course, an important thing to discuss is, can you talk a bit about the average cost ranges for converting different classes of fleet vehicles and how long it takes to convert one vehicle from a combustion engine to an all-electric vehicle? And there's a second part of this question is, are diesel vehicles harder and more expensive to convert than gasoline-powered vehicles?
Yeah, so the first part of the question, so we think about conversion in two ways. One of them is a new vehicle. So our plant takes new vehicles and makes them takes a chassis from Ford, Hino, Isuzu, GM, and Navistar, and makes it an electric vehicle. So we don't really call those conversions. They are a new vehicle assembly. In those cases, right now today, we're doing about 30 to 40 a month. Of those kind of vehicles. So so some cases we have a queue for, if a customer just ordered 80 of them, then we might have a queue of 2 months. But we still try to plug in customers in between. And so quite often, if you told me you wanted a new Ford Transit electric today, I've got some in inventory. I'm producing enough of them every month. I could probably get you one in 2 to 3 weeks. So it's fast. If you told me you want a very highly customized ambulance-type solution, it might take 12 to 16 weeks. So it kind of ranges from somewhat immediate to 12 to 16 weeks, depending on the specific vehicle and customization. And I think that's not uncommon with even if you were buying a gasoline or diesel variant of those vehicles. We don't really. It's the same to us whether the chassis originally started as a diesel or started as an electric. The way we do it, we build a complete powertrain that has a full framework in it that just plugs in where the original, original internal combustion engine went. So we don't really differentiate from how long it takes nor from how much it costs between the two of those. For example, Ford Transit, you could still, until last year, buy a diesel version of that, and it was the same to us whether you wanted us to repower a diesel or start with a new one that might have started its life as a gasoline. So repowers, same way. We look at repowers and assembling new vehicles the same way. The powertrain cost is the same. And generally, the cost to install it is the same, whether the vehicle already has an engine or doesn't, or comes as a roller or a glider chassis to us. So those generally look about the same. And the reason why is the decontent time tends to be about the same, offset by what we're able to sell that decontented material for. So we look at all those the same. From an average price, it varies a lot by size of vehicle because that determines battery, and it also varies a lot by how much range you want. The less range you want, the cheaper it is because we can put in less battery power. The more range you want, the more expensive it is, and it may even go all the way up to a fuel cell variant if you need a lot of range and a lot of payload. Obviously, with each different class of vehicle, it has larger, as you move up the chain, you have larger motors and transmissions to support it as well. And in the case of passenger vehicles like a big coach, you have a lot more infrastructure around compressors for electrified compressors for the suspension and the air brakes, and also electrified air conditioning and heating systems that are obviously much larger on a big coach than they are on a Ford Transit cargo. So the range will be about $50,000 for a electric, Ford Transit powertrain add-on, all the way to $400,000 for a large coach. So a pretty big variation for all those reasons. Batteries being the biggest variant.
Right. Oh, talking about batteries now. We have a question about battery technology. Prices are falling rather. Because battery technology is getting better, and do you foresee that? Maybe this is something more of a look ahead question, but do you foresee that as helping to bring costs down for fleets as those battery costs start to
dramatically?
Start to fall?
Yeah, and I think it's so they already have. So this year we saw the battery prices fall in big quantities by up to 30 to 40%, and we're passing that on to customers even this year who place larger order quantities. And that's a big number, obviously, to drop prices by 40%.
Right.
And that's largely driven by battery prices. And we see that continuing for the next 2 to 3 years. Commercial vehicles are behind passenger vehicles. Passenger vehicles have already seen this drop. Commercial vehicles are much lower volume. Obviously, Tesla and GM put together doing over 500,000 passenger vehicles, whereas you look at commercial vehicles, all of us together will have sold about 1,000 in 2020. So it's a fraction of the volume, and therefore it's well behind, being able to take advantage of this battery drop. But it's still going to happen. You can see the road and the map that the roadmap that the passenger vehicles have put out there. We'll see the same thing in commercial vehicles as the volumes increase. So that's already happening right now in a very material way, and will continue to happen over the next 18 months in a very material way. And then I expect it to plateau at some point, because obviously batteries won't go to zero. You still have magnesium and cobalt and aluminum and nickel in them, so they don't go to zero, but as the volumes increase, they get better. The other thing to note is the quality. We're seeing a significant improvement in reliability and quality of the batteries too, as well as energy density. So we can now fit more batteries in with less payload degradation because of that. So a lot of great things happening. That it is the biggest driver of improvements in the space is the batteries.
Okay, that's great. So one of our international attendees has a question about, do you have Canadian distribution for your vehicles?
Excited to say we do, as well as Mexico and South America. So we do offer our vehicles and our powertrains throughout the Americas today. Always looking for more partners in Canada. We've just started going into Canada in the last 6 months, so it's newer to us. Mexico will start in another month, so it's newest yet. We've been working in South America for a while, in Brazil and other places, so those are certainly happening. Each of those, as everybody knows, come with their set of complexities, but Canada is the easiest of all of them because of the trade agreements that are already in place there. So Canada's a great place for us. We're excited about it. We've already got customers there. Would love to grow that, and also love to grow our partnerships there as well.
Okay, well, great. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. We do hope that you all enjoyed today's webinar. And for those of you who did not have your questions answered, and we have many questions, I can tell you it's very exciting, they will be answered by the Lightning eMotors team after the event individually. I do want to, again, thank our speaker, Tim Reeser, for today's presentation. And I also would like to thank the entire Lightning eMotors team for their help in putting this presentation together. We do hope that you all enjoyed today's webinar. I also want to mention that this webinar will be available on demand on the Work Truck website at worktruckonline.com/webinars. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending today, and I hope you all have a great day.